Welcome to this first of our Officer Elections 2022 candidate training sessions. I am just going to quickly share my screen. I have a PowerPoint ready to go. There we go. If you can't now see a slideshow, let me know in the chat and I can try and sort that out. Or actually, maybe unmute and say it because I can't see the chat at this point. But we won't use this first bit of the recording anyway, so don't worry. Welcome to our first session. It's our first officer training candidate workshop of Officer Elections 2022. My name is Bradley. I am the Student Representation Coordinator. And for these elections, I'm also your Deputy Returning Officer. So I am the person you are going to get bombarded with emails from. I am also the person, if you have any questions whatsoever about elections, anything you're not sure about at all, any complaints to do with elections, I am your person to come to. I am your one-stop shop for anything elections related. So this session is really aimed at trying to make sure people understand what it is to be an officer. It's for you to get a sense, maybe you're thinking about running the elections, you like the idea of being an officer, but you're not quite sure exactly what it is you want to do, whether the role is exactly for you. And indeed, out of all the roles we've got available, which one is for you. So hopefully this session, if you're one of those people, this session will help you figure out what it is to be an officer, if it's for you, and which role you want to go for if you decide to run for a role. So the first question is why elections? Why are we running elections? And why are we trying to get officers in place? We're a democratic students' union, which means we are run by and for students. That's absolutely at the core of what we are as a union. That is why we do what we do, and we're here to represent students, but also to be led by them as well. This means we need a set of elected leaders that are students chosen by the student body. So that's why every year we run these elections to choose our leadership team, which is our student officers. And really, as well as choosing who is in the roles, the elections period, I suppose, is a chance for the student body to think about, to discuss with each other and to decide what they think are the things that we as a union should be focusing on. You know, what are the priorities for the student body? What are the most important issues that need to be dealt with? All officer candidates will put together a manifesto. Our next workshop will talk all about manifestos, but those manifestos really are a statement from each officer about what issues they think are important and what issues they would deal with if they were elected as an officer. So in choosing between those candidates, this is a chance for the student body to decide, yes, that's the issue I think is most important, or that, you know, that's the person I think would do the best job in tackling this problem. So that's why we have elections and why we have elected officers. And there's a few things that all officers, whichever role you're in, we'll come on to the different roles in a minute, but whatever officer role you're in, there's a few things that you will definitely be doing as an officer. The absolute core of the role, as it is with all elected roles, obviously, is to gather and action feedback. So let's say you're the health school officer. Absolutely core to your role is listening to health school students, and for school officers, listening to the course reps as well. Speaking to those students, finding out what issues they've got, and ultimately taking those to university and trying to get action on them. Now, as a students' union, there's lots we can do to support you. There's lots of things we can do to help you gather that feedback. So you can go old school and literally go up and speak to students, and we would definitely encourage you to do that. There's lots of other things you can do as well. We can help you hold focus groups, we can help run surveys, we can send information out via email to students. So there's lots of things we as a staff team can do to support you in that. But absolutely at the core, and you know, it's the officer that needs to be leading it, absolutely at the core of your role as an officer is gathering and actioning feedback from the students you represent. Often as a result of that, or perhaps because of something you pledged to do in your manifesto during elections, officers will often run campaigns. Now, a campaign can be quite simple. It could be that you want to see a specific policy in the university changed, and it might be that you draft some changes with help from the SU staff. Take that to some meetings with the university. You know, try and convince the members of the university to do it. And that's what you need to do, and it passes, it changes. That's a really simple campaign, or it might be something longer. You know, it might be a larger change or something that takes a bit longer to achieve. and you might organise campaign groups. You might do all sorts of things, and we've got all sorts of training in place for officers. So campaigns can mean lots of different things, but ultimately they're about trying to change things. It's about trying to improve something or change something on campus. Events, well, so officers will often run events. A good example of that is recently, not this year but the year before, our BAME officer ran a whole series of events for Black History Month. This year, with the help of the society as well, our LGBT officer is running a variety of events for LGBT History Month as well. That's a really good example of the sorts of events officers might run. They could be educational, aimed at educating people about an issue relevant to your role. It could be something as simple as a drop-in. So sometimes officers might hold a drop-in session somewhere on campus, or even an online one in the COVID era, giving a chance for students to come and drop in and talk to them about their concerns. Sometimes students really value being able to speak to an officer in person, so it could be an event running that way. All sorts of events, but I suppose the aim is to still help gather feedback from students, and also develop a bit of community for that group of students that you're representing. And again, the student senior staff team can help set up and promote events, book rooms, set up Zoom meetings, all the rest of it. Student council is absolutely core to any elected role. So student council is the main decision-making body of the students' union. It's where all of our elected representatives sit. So all of our course reps, accommodation reps, all part-time and full-time officers, all of them sit on student council, and that is where the student union makes the decisions about how it runs. Basically, it's where we pass policy, where we make changes to our governance. The two president roles have to deliver a report every month, and the trustees deliver a report every other month on all the things that they've been doing and the things the student union's doing. And those reports are voted on. So it's a way of holding the trustees and the officers to account as well. So all part-time officers, all full-time officers will sit on student council, and that's because it's a primary decision-making body. That's why it's really key part of your role as an officer, and part of your responsibility in leading the student union. And another meeting all officers will attend is the Student Officer Committee. This usually meets the week after Student Council, and it's just for officers, so just the part-time and full-time officers. And that is where, if something passes Student Council, so let's say students passed a motion calling on the student union to do something, or to ask for something, or to campaign on a certain issue, Student Officer Committee is where the officers get together and figure out, okay, how exactly are we going to do this? How are we going to put this into practice? What are our first steps? It's also a chance for all the officers to speak to each other, update each other on the things they've been doing over the past month, and figure out if there's places where they can help or assist each other as well. So whatever officer role you go for, these 5 things are the key, the core of the role as an officer. This is something you will do whatever role you're in as an officer. And obviously, how much you do of it will depend on how much time you've got, and what resources you've got, and what things you think are most important. But again, we can help you as a team figure those questions out. You're certainly not on your own in all this. Before we come on to the different roles specifically, I suppose that the question that many students might have when they think about running for a role is, what's in it for me? What do I get out of being an officer? First thing is, if you run for one of our part-time roles, you would get access to Suffolk Plus, which is our employability scheme. Essentially, you would have to complete a certain number of volunteering hours. For our bronze tier, it's 10 volunteering hours. You complete some content on Future Me, which is the university careers team sort of employability scheme. There's lots of useful things on there, from CV builders and all sorts of activities to help with your employability. And then finally, we ask you to reflect on some of the skills you've developed in your volunteering. So let's say you put in 6 hours of student council volunteering. You spent 6 hours in student council this year. We would also ask you to think about what sort of skills have you developed through council. So it might be that you've stood up and spoken about an issue that is brought to student council. That's helping you develop your public speaking skills. You could add public speaking as a skill you develop through that volunteering. And then we would ask you just to reflect a little bit on that. So, exactly how did you develop that skill, and how, do you think there's more room for improvement? Are there things you want to do next to continue to develop that skill further? So all of that together gives you the Suffolk Plus Award. That will, if you achieve at least bronze, that will appear on your Hero Awards. So it will appear on your transcripts at the end of university. You'll get a certificate from us as well, so you can put it on your CV, and you also get rewards. So at bronze level, you get one of the, I should have brought one with me, you get one of those brilliant hot flasks for hot water and coffee and things from the SU, and the tier, you know, the higher up you go, the higher the rewards. So when you get, if you complete gold, you get a free ticket to our summer, the Students' Union summer ball that's coming up as well. You also, of course, throughout all of this, develop skills and gain new experiences. Officers will often be called on, you've already talked about student council, but you'll also perhaps potentially be invited to a university committee. Depending on what you do in your role, you might present a paper at it, you might just speak up on an issue that someone else has brought to that meeting. All of that will be developing diplomacy skills, public speaking, potentially research skills, a whole range of different skills you can develop through being an officer. And again, we provide training, as the expert says, we provide training and support throughout that as a Students' Union. So our role as a staff team, I'm not a student, I'm a full-time staff member. My job is to help you do the things you want to do as an officer. So I can help you research issues, I can help you prepare a paper, I can help you decide what ultimately it's your decision, but I can give you advice on what steps to take next. So every step of the way, there's support there from the Students' Union team. And we go on a big residential training trip in the summer once all of our officer team are elected. We go away for 2-3 days as a staff and officer team all together, get to know everyone really well, and do lots of sort of intense training that on those 2-3 days at the start to really get you ready to start your role. And of course, the final most important benefit you get out of being an officer is a chance to make an actual difference on campus. You know, we'll come on to some of the wins that previous officers have had in the recent past, but it is really a chance. If there's something you're passionate about, something you want to see change or improve, there's no better chance to do that than as a Students' Union officer. So there's 4 groups of roles available. So there's the President Education, President Activities and Wellbeing roles. So we'll group those into President roles, and we'll talk about those first. Those are the full-time paid roles at the Students' Union. And then we've got 3 different groups of volunteer officer roles where you're a volunteer and you're only expected to spend a small amount of time each week in that role. So these are school officers, liberation officers, and campus officers. So we'll go through each of these in turn. Different roles. So the first roles, these roles are full-time and they are paid. So if you were elected into a president role, it would be your full-time job. It's a full-time job where you represent students all day, every day. That's what you do. You have an office. It's just through this wall behind me. And you basically, every day is your job to represent students. You would also become a trustee of the Students' Union. So trustees are legally responsible for a charity, because as a charity, we have to have a board of trustees. So as a president, you would be a trustee of the Students' Union, and again, you'd get lots of training to support you in that role. You'd also be a director of CISL, which is our commercial arm, and that runs the shop. And you also get to be a director of the university as well, and you get to sit on various different high-level committees for the university. You will get extensive training and support. All our officers get a lot of training, but particularly the president roles, because it's your full-time job, because you've got that extra level of responsibility, you'll get lots and lots of training. The National Union of Students will provide training. We'll put you through training to be a trustee that's through professional bodies. So you get really quite extensive training, and of course you've got you work in an office with a whole staff team as well that are there to support you each day. There's two president roles. The first role is President Education. So this role is very focused on the academic experience of students. So particularly focused on tackling academic issues that students come to the president with, basically improving the educational experience you have as a student. President will work very closely with school officers and the course reps as well, who are also elected to represent students on academic issues. So that's very much the focus for the President Education, is around academic issues. So think about the sort of things that you're passionate about, the sort of things you might want to change if you were elected into an officer role. Do they relate to how assessment works? Do they relate to teaching that students receive? Are they very focused on that academic experience of university? If so, maybe the President Education role is the one for you. There is also the President Activities and Wellbeing, so a slightly different focus for this role. Again, think about the sort of issues that you're passionate about. Are you passionate about sport at university? Do you want to run lots of campaigns around mental health, maybe the President Activities and Wellbeing role is more for you. So President Activities and Wellbeing will support development of sports and societies in the Students' Union, and campaign on wider issues to do with student wellbeing. So it could be this year, things around sustainability and mental health. Could be things around that in future years as well. So that's the focus for that role. And I should say there is obviously lots of areas that two presidents work on together as well. So they will sometimes be at the same committee meetings, higher up in university if there's a decision for the Students' Union to make in terms of direction it goes on a certain issue, or if you need to do some press, sometimes local press might want to interview someone from the Students' Union. That will be shared responsibility between the two presidents. We do also have a series of part-time officer roles. So these ones, as opposed to the president roles, these are more spending just a few hours at most a week as a volunteer. You do, of course, still receive training. You get to come on our residential, and there'll be lots of training and support provided. But rather than the presidents have obviously specific remits, but they represent all students in the university, part-time officers will have a specific group of students that they represent. And we'll talk about those in a minute. And as I already mentioned about Suffolk Plus, you will be entered into Suffolk Plus as a part-time officer. So there is the school officer role, which is, like the President of Education, is focused on academic issues. So as a school officer, you would work very closely with your course reps. So ideally each course in the university has a course rep that represents those students. The school officer's role is to support those course reps, talk to those course reps, find out what issues are going on, and try and spot things that are maybe a problem than just one course. It's a wider issue than just one course. It's maybe affecting multiple courses in a school. That's where we'd want the school officer to get involved. Or maybe a course rep has tried to tackle an issue and not been able to. Then again, that could be where the school officer comes in and offers that support to the course rep. So the core of that role really is working with those course reps to find out what academic issues are going on in the school, what things can be improved, and I suppose developing a sense of community across courses in that school as well. Liberation officer role is focused on specific liberation groups. The next slide has, here we go, a list of all the different roles we have available. As you can see, there are quite a lot. The list seems to grow each year. So there's lots of different opportunities available within liberation officer roles. The liberation officers' primary aim is to campaign and run events for the students that they represent. So all of these groups will be based on self-identification. So if you identify as part of one of these groups, you can run to be an officer for that role. And yeah, your main aim will be to run campaigns and events for these students throughout the year. Final category of roles we have is campus officer. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, at the moment we have these in place for Bury Campus, East Coast, and LSC London as well. So campus officer is there to make sure that the Students' Union is hearing the voice of students at our partner institutions. So depending on the institution, if you became a campus officer, depending on what's in place on your campus, your role could be to liaise with the course rep system that's in place on that campus, and hear about the views and the problems that are coming through to course reps and to support them. If there's not that system in place, it could be that you hold drop-ins yourself or find other ways to engage with students yourself. But the core of that role is to find out what issues are University of Suffolk students at that partner institute facing, and relay those to the Students' Union and run campaigns and run events to try and deal with those issues. So that's the core of the campus officer role. What's it like to be an officer? I've just been joined by our social sciences and humanities school officer. So I'm going to hand over the floor to Emily. You can take a chair.
Hi, I am social science and humanities school officer for this past year. I was a course rep for 2 years before that. It's great, honestly. Like, I would recommend going for it if you're thinking about it. Not just my role, obviously, but any of them. It's really great to actually work with the SU and get to know everybody. My manifesto points were to do with communication. So although it was my role is quite academic, we found that the problems in my school kind of revolved more around like the passing on of information. So in my role, I've set up meetings with the deans across all of the schools to try and like get a level playing field for everybody and find out what's going on, and making sure that all the information is actually available for everybody. So fingers crossed, hopefully that's done some good. But yeah, it's really good, and it's amazing for your CV, which Bradley's probably already told you. But if you're looking for something good to go on your CV and you're passionate about joining the SU, then I'd say go for it. Did I sell us enough?
You did. Thank you very much. Seamless transition back to me. Thank you very much, Emily. So that's from the mouth of one of our current officers, what it's like to be an officer. And a final bit I wanted to talk about is, because I think sometimes students worry about, am I actually going to be able to change anything as an officer? Obviously, I'm paid to say yes, but really, yes, you can. So I'm just going to whiz through a few examples of things that officers have played a part in, or changed themselves over the last few years. There we go. Sorry, strange slide transition. So neutral toilets, officers in the recent past, officer has pushed for more gender neutral toilets on campus, and pushed to extend library opening hours. The wonderful social space that you can see if you come to the Students' Union building, that was achieved by campaigning by Students' Union officers, as was Shop SU as well. And officers have worked on promoting and getting better facilities, and more promotion around a baby nurture room on campus as well. So those are just 5 I've plucked at random that have been achieved by officers over the past year. There's many more that we could talk about if we had time as well. So now what? So for you, we'll come on to questions in a minute if anyone has any. But if you're interested in a role, I think the first thing to decide is, what exactly do I want to do? So you heard about the different roles that are up for grabs. Think about the things that you're passionate about, the things that you want to change, the things that you really care about as a student, and the sort of things you want to work on, and that will help you figure out which of the roles it is you want to go for. Of course, to decide whether you want to be a president role or one of the part-time roles, you also need to think, do I want to take a year out for my studies, or if you're in your final year, do I want to take a year out before I go into whatever else it was you want to do, or do you want to just do something volunteering alongside your studies? That will help you figure out whether you want to go for a president role or one of the part-time roles as well. Next thing to do is then nominate yourself on our Students' Union website. So the URL is usunion.org/elections hub. If you go to that, you will see a brilliant new website that we've got up, that will show you all the details that you need for our elections, and you can nominate yourself there. You can still find out more about the roles there, find out all about elections, all the support you can get as a candidate. You find all of it out there, and that's where you nominate yourself as well. And also, we've got a series of workshops. So this is the first of many workshops throughout February to help students figure out if they want to run for a role, what role they want to run for, and then actually how to prepare a campaign in the officer elections. So our next session is next week. I believe it's next Tuesday at 1 p.m. It will be by Zoom again, and this will all be about writing a winning manifesto. So I've mentioned a manifesto a few times today. That's your statement on why you think you'd be the best candidate for the role, and the sorts of things you would want to focus on as an officer, maybe specific campaign ideas that you'd want to campaign on if you're an officer. So our next training session at 1 p.m. next week is all about writing a winning manifesto. So that's it from me.